page 38, and there are some juicy and illuminating details in footnote 12. If you've been following the footnotes, you will notice that the ones that begin with the tag RN, those are original to the author. RN stands for Rousseau's note. If they begin with the tag TN, that stands for translator's note. So that's useful background information, but the ones that are marked RN are really part of the argument and part of the text. And Rousseau seems to have some fun, to feel a little delight in picking out details from history that run contrary to the general trend, that is, to show some places where even people who were going wrong, who were being corrupted, recognized the truth and how they were going backwards. So we see that among the Athenians, who were famous for their eloquence, that is, they developed the art of making political speeches, and they developed the art of public speaking more than had ever been done in the past. When it really counted, they banned that sort of speech and insisted that people speak simply and directly. For the most important things, even they didn't want their advancements in sciences and the arts. Here, this is footnote 12, continued over to the right-hand column of page 38. Similar detail. The Romans banned medicine. They wanted to keep themselves strong, not by developing the technology that Descartes was so looking forward to, but by getting rid of that, leaving the Romans to trust their own clean living and their healthy exercise. The Spanish conquered much of the Americas, and what did they do? They left all their lawyers at home, but this was a special strength of Europe, carrying on from what the Greeks had started. The traditions of having a court system. But what is more conventional and arbitrary than that? The elaborate rituals and precedents and practices that court systems developed. Even the Spanish, who were suffering from it themselves at home, didn't want to export it to the New World. And that's a sign that they understood their corruption, even as they were being further corrupted. So here, still on page 38, we turn now to a comparison of the ancient Greek cities of Athens and Sparta. I asked about this in the reading questions. Now, there was a very great difference between these two cities. You will remember that Descartes mentioned Sparta. Sparta is still famous as a city of complete military virtue. It was a city with a virtue that pleased Rousseau. They kept their freedom, and among other things, Sparta had no wall around it. If you wanted to attack Sparta, you didn't do what you normally did, assemble your army around the outside of the city while the residents hid inside and did battle over the walls. If you wanted to fight Sparta, you were free, that you could march right up, but you had to deal directly with the Spartans, which for 800 years or so was a losing proposition for everyone. Now, the Spartans are a good example for Rousseau because they scorned the arts. They were very poorly developed in education and the sciences, except for their particular military science and their military education. They were not eloquent people. In fact, they didn't like to speak at all. The word survives in current English. Laconic. Laconia was the place where Sparta was in Greece. And if you were a Spartan, you lived in Laconia. And so you were said to be laconic, but that's come to mean that you don't say very much. If you're the sort of person who doesn't like talking and would rather do something than talk about doing it, then you could be called laconic. This was, of course, completely different from Athens, the land where everyone is famous for speaking, and they have philosophers to think and debate about what they're doing, which in Rousseau's mind is a preventative to actually doing it. So the traditional comparison of Athens and Sparta, Rousseau turns to his own account and makes that support his thesis. So here on page 40, Rousseau makes a turn in the argument. He had been talking about places that were far away from home and times that were distant by many centuries from the present. And now he wants to come back to the here and now. He talks mostly about France as his present country. Rousseau was always divided between France and Switzerland. So we're going to take a turn in the present. What is France like? How are things there? Well, the situation is the same. There's the same inverse relationship since France has advanced very far in mental things. It has regressed very far in the things of the soul and virtuous things. And he begins to press his thesis to something that may sound perverse to us. Perhaps it is better not to have knowledge, even while we consider that it is knowledge. This is different from the counter-argument as it might be. In Descartes' day, there might be an argument back against him that his account is simply wrong before modern science had reached the stage of Newton, before everyone was able to see how powerful it was and how much study you need even to consider yourself worthy to argue against it. Before that happened, people could simply say that modern science was an error and argue for the superiority of the old ways. But Rousseau doesn't consider that he has that privilege, that modern science is some kind of wisdom. But is it a good thing to have that wisdom? Perhaps lacking it is a kind of safety. So he makes a metaphor. Mothers looked after their children to make sure they don't have tools that are more dangerous than they can handle. Mother Nature does this by hiding secrets from human beings. Because we can't be trusted. We're like children. We have the strength to hold and use a knife, but not the wisdom to know what should be cut and where accidents and danger might happen. And of course, we can see the power of this argument even more clearly than Rousseau was able to do. If you think of things like genetic manipulation, biological weapons, all of those things seem to be tools that our ingenuity can produce, but which we don't have the greater wisdom to know how to handle. So he asked these questions that I left for you in the reading questions. And it's good to think of the strange situation that we don't have the simple situation where we say a certain education is bad because it's false. We have a more difficult argument. A certain education is bad although it's true. So Rousseau asked, could probity, right? What is probity? Having good judgment, making good practical decisions. Could that be the daughter of ignorance? Could you have wisdom in more important things because you are ignorant in lesser things? And finally this, which is a kind of summary of the great argument he's been making all along. So I will leave that for you to consider and to post to our discussion forum in Thursday's class.